Somewhere around 1935, in a Kentucky farmhouse with a tin roof and a backfield that sloped toward the creek, a man walked the rows of a plant his grandfather had grown. 12 acres of it, taller than his shoulder by midsummer. His family had been growing it for nearly 100 years. The fiber went into rope, into cloth, into the burlap sacks against the barn wall. It was just another part of the farm. During the last war, the government had asked his neighbors to plant more of it. 2 years later, that same government wrote a single piece of paper that turned every plant in his field into a federal crime. Not slowly, all at once. The plant was hemp. The year was 1937. And it is one of about 20 things your grandparents grew, freely, on their own land, that you can no longer legally grow on yours. Some of them were food. Some were medicine. Some are what made root beer taste like root beer. Most are still growing somewhere on this continent right now, but only in the places where the Federal Register has not caught up yet. Number 15 is sold openly at every garden center in this country, while what was made from it stayed federally banned for 95 years. Number 12 was made illegal across most of America for nearly 60 years to protect a single industry's profits. Number 7 used to live in every American farmhouse medicine cabinet until the FDA quietly took it out of yours. And most people walking past these plants today have no idea any of it ever happened. That is the part that started this list. Before we count down, hit the subscribe button. There is more on the way, and some of what is coming you will not believe was ever legal at all. We start at number 20. Number 20 on this list is the opium poppy, Papaver somniferum. And if your grandmother had a flower bed in the backyard, there is a good chance she grew them. They came over with European settlers in the 17th century. By the 1800s, the bread seed varieties were in seed catalogs across America. Burpee sold them. Comstock Ferre sold them. Farm wives traded the seed in churchyards and on porches because the plants reseeded themselves every spring without help. Patent medicine men sold tonics made from them on every wagon stop from Boston to St. Louis. Civil War surgeons used the opium derivatives for pain. By the time the catalog companies were mailing seed packets to every postal address in the country, the poppy was just another flower people grew for the look of it. Then came the early 1900s, the patent medicine scandals, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914, and the Opium Poppy Control Act of 1942, which made cultivation a federal offense, requiring a license that no ordinary citizen could get. By 1970, the Controlled Substances Act locked the framework in place. Today, growing Papaver somniferum is technically a federal crime. The strange part is, seed companies still sell it. They sell it as a flower seed, as a baking seed, as a birdseed mix. Nobody enforces the rule. Walk through a Midwestern garden in late June and you will see them everywhere. Pink, lilac, white, deep purple. Petals that look like crepe paper. Seed heads that rattle when you tap them. The seeds taste mildly of almond. They top a poppy seed muffin and they sit in your spice rack, and the Drug Enforcement Administration officially considers the plant contraband. The plant did not change. The grandmother's flower bed did not change. The paperwork changed. Every state has a few people who know that the breadseed poppy in their grandmother's garden is, on the books, a federal felony. They do not enforce it. They cannot enforce it. The plant grows in Vatican gardens, in White House borders, in your neighbor's yard right now. That is the gentlest entry on this list. Number 19, castor bean, a common ornamental in southern gardens for 200 years. Tall, tropical-looking, deep red leaves. Farmers and grandmothers pressed the seeds for castor oil. The same seeds contain ricin, one of the most poisonous substances on earth. After the attacks of 2001, the federal government began treating the seeds and any large-scale processing of them as a potential bioterrorism concern. The plant is still legal to grow ornamentally in most places. Number 18 on this list. Datura, also called Jimson weed. The name comes from Jamestown, where colonial soldiers in 1676 accidentally ate the plant and spent 11 days in a delirium that gave the weed its name. Datura grew wild across the colonies and was grown ornamentally in cottage gardens for centuries. Today, it is restricted as a drug in several states because of its psychoactive alkaloids, while remaining legal as an ornamental in others. Same plant, different aisle in the law. Number 17. Belladonna, the deadly nightshade. Used medicinally for centuries, then in cosmetics in 19th century Europe and America, where women dropped the extract into their eyes to dilate the pupils. That is where the name comes from. Beautiful woman. Several states restrict its commercial sale because of its toxicity. The plant your grandmother had in the corner of the herb bed is in some jurisdictions the same plant she would need a permit to grow today. Number 16. Foxglove, the source of digitalis, the heart medicine. It grew along stone walls and behind barns across the country. The compound saved lives for 2 centuries. The plant itself is so toxic that ingestion can stop a heart inside an hour. Many schools and public garden programs now advise against planting it where children are present. Number 15. Wormwood. You have probably seen it in nurseries under the Latin name Artemisia absinthium. It is what gives absinthe, the green French liqueur, its bite. From 1912 until 2007, the drink absinthe was federally banned in the United States. 95 years of federal prohibition. The plant itself sat in herb gardens across the country the entire time. Almost nobody who grew it knew that what their grandparents had made from it was federally illegal. Number 14. Running bamboo, the fast-spreading kind. Grandparents planted it as a privacy screen between yards in the 1950s and the 1960s. By the time anyone realized how invasive running bamboo actually was, it had escaped into wetlands, riverbanks, and neighbors' properties across the country. Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey, and several other states have banned the sale of certain running bamboo species. A privacy hedge in 1955 is, in some states today, an illegal plant. Number 13 on this list. Calamus root, Acorus calamus, also called sweet flag. It grew in damp ditches and along creek beds in every eastern American state. Grandparents chewed the dried root for indigestion. Distillers used the oil in bitters and liqueurs. Native Americans used it for centuries before settlers picked it up. Then, on May 9, 1968, the Food and Drug Administration filed one paragraph in the Federal Register that prohibited calamus from any use in human food. Animal studies on the Indian variety had linked one of its compounds to liver tumors. The plant is still legal to grow. The use that made it part of every American grandmother's medicine cabinet is, by federal order, gone. Number 12 on this list. The black currant, Ribes nigrum. A small dark berry, slightly oily, almost peppery on the tongue. Most Americans alive today have never tasted one. Their grandparents probably had. Their great-grandparents almost certainly had. In the 1800s, currants of every color grew on farmsteads across the eastern United States. They came over with English, Scottish, and other European immigrants who had eaten them at home. The berries went into jam, into cordial, into pies, into a thick, dark syrup that small children took for sore throats. The bushes were hardy, the harvest was reliable, and the fruit was the closest thing American gardens had to a native blueberry before blueberries were domesticated. Then a problem appeared, not with the currants, but with white pine. White pine was, at the turn of the 20th century, the most economically important timber crop in the United States. Northeastern lumber barons had built fortunes on it. A fungal disease called white pine blister rust, imported on European nursery stock in the early 1900s, threatened the entire industry. The fungus needed two hosts to complete its life cycle. One was the white pine. The other was the genus Ribes. Currants, gooseberries. The lumber industry could not eliminate the fungus, and they could eliminate the alternate host. In 1911, the federal government, under pressure from the timber industry, banned the cultivation and importation of black currants and several related species across the country. State quarantines followed. Federal Horticultural Board orders followed. Farm wives who had grown the berry for 40 years pulled the bushes out under government order. Civilian Conservation Corps crews ripped wild ribes plants out of forests by the millions during the 1930s. The federal ban remained in place until 1966, 55 years. During that half-century, an entire generation of American children grew up without ever tasting a black currant. The European cousins, the same people whose grandmothers had brought the seeds over, ate them every summer. Americans forgot what they tasted like. Some states still ban them. Massachusetts, Maine, and New Hampshire have either full or partial restrictions in place to this day. New York's state ban was overturned only in 2003, and the strangest part is that the white pine industry the ban was designed to protect collapsed anyway. Cheaper imported timber, exhausted American forests, and the rise of softwoods from the Pacific Northwest finished what blister rust started. The fruit was banned, the trees vanished, and the people who pushed the legislation died decades ago. The bushes that nobody planted for 55 years are now slowly coming back, sold in the nurseries that are still allowed to sell them. A few American jam companies have started making the dark syrup again. Most older Americans, the ones whose grandparents ate them, will never bother to try one. On to number 11. Number 11, gooseberries and red currants. The 1911 white pine blister rust ban did not apply only to black currants. It hit the entire Ribes genus. Gooseberries, red currants, white currants. Some species fight the fungus better than others, but the federal ban swept them all. The federal restrictions on red currants and gooseberries lifted in the 1960s, but several New England states kept their own bans in place. American gardeners who want to grow a gooseberry today have to check what state they live in first. Number 10. Coca leaf. The original Coca-Cola from 1886 to 1903 contained real coca leaf extract. So did dozens of patent medicines sold openly in American pharmacies. The Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914 began the federal classification. Today, the plant is Schedule II of the Controlled Substances Act. The same plant that flavored a soft drink for 17 years became the same federal category as morphine. Number 9. Tobacco. Most Americans do not think of tobacco as a banned plant. It is not. You can grow it on your own land. You cannot sell it without registering as a tobacco manufacturer, paying federal excise tax, and meeting state-level licensing rules that vary widely. A crop John Rolfe planted at Jamestown in 1612 that financed the early colonies and became the most important cash crop in North America for 2 centuries, is now wrapped in so much paperwork that almost nobody grows it anymore. The Code of Federal Regulations now runs to nearly 200,000 pages, across more than 50 titles. Title 21 alone, which the FDA enforces, covers food, drugs, and a list of botanical substances long enough that nobody outside the agency reads it cover to cover. Number 8 on this list. Ephedra, also called Mormon tea or ma huang. It is native to the American West. It was used by Mormon settlers as a stimulant tea, by Chinese herbalists for 2,000 years, and by American supplement companies in the 1990s as a weight loss ingredient. After several documented deaths, including the death of a Baltimore Orioles pitcher in 2003, the Food and Drug Administration banned dietary supplements containing ephedrine alkaloids in 2004. The plant itself still grows wild across the western states. The tea is mostly legal. The supplements that made the plant famous are gone. Number 7. Comfrey. You can grow it in your garden today. Your great-grandmother probably did. Symphytum officinale. The leaves and roots were used for centuries to set bones, to heal wounds, to brew teas for stomach trouble. In 2001, the Food and Drug Administration pulled all oral comfrey supplements from the American market after the compounds called pyrrolizidine alkaloids were linked to liver damage. The plant is still legal to grow. What it cannot be used for anymore is the medicine your great-grandmother used it for. Number 6 on this list, industrial hemp. In 1619, the Virginia colony passed a law requiring every farm to plant it. Not suggested, required. A century later, Thomas Jefferson grew it at Monticello. George Washington grew it at Mount Vernon. The seed sacks in barns across the colonies were stitched from the fiber that came off those fields. For 300 years, hemp was the most ordinary crop in American agriculture. Ordinary as corn, ordinary as wheat. Then in 1930, the federal government created the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and put a man named Harry Anslinger in charge of it. Anslinger had a problem. The end of alcohol prohibition was coming, and his new agency needed something to enforce. So Anslinger turned toward cannabis. Most Americans at the time did not even use the word marijuana. He pushed the term into newspapers and radio broadcasts, tying the plant to crime and panic, until the country started seeing it differently. Then came the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. Technically, hemp was not outright banned. In practice, farmers suddenly needed permits, tax stamps, paperwork that was almost impossible to navigate. And just like that, families who had grown hemp for generations stopped planting it. That is the part that stays with me. Not the politicians, not the laws, the farmers. The man standing in that Kentucky field, watching a crop his grandfather had trusted become something people suddenly acted afraid of. One season, it is normal. The next season, it feels risky. Then eventually, people stop talking about it altogether. And yet during World War II, when America suddenly needed fiber again, the same government released a film called Hemp for Victory and asked farmers to grow the crop they had just been forbidden from growing. Then the war ended. The restrictions came back. That cycle lasted for decades. In 1970, hemp was buried even deeper under the Controlled Substances Act, placed on Schedule I alongside heroin. For most Americans alive today, hemp became something associated with controversy instead of farming. But if you actually walk through a hemp field, it feels less like a dangerous thing and more like something ancient America forgot how to use. 10-foot stalks, tough fiber, seeds packed with protein, a crop that once grew across huge parts of this country without anybody thinking twice about it. The rules finally changed federally in 2018. But by then, 3 generations had already grown up without it. The mills were gone. The family knowledge was gone. The seed sacks against the barn wall were long gone too. And that story, something ordinary disappearing slowly enough that people stop questioning it, is going to happen again and again on this list. On to number 5. Number 5. Kava. Brought to America by Pacific Islander communities in the 19th century, it was used ceremonially across Polynesia for 2,000 years. It was sold openly in American supplement shops through the 1990s. After a cluster of liver toxicity reports came out of Europe in 2001, the Food and Drug Administration issued a public warning. Federal law does not ban it. Wisconsin treats it as a controlled substance, while Colorado and New Jersey restrict its sale. The plant lives in a legal gray space your grandmother would never have anticipated. Number 4 on this list. Bloodroot, Sanguinaria canadensis, native to the eastern American forests. The roots bleed a thick red sap when broken, which is where the name comes from. Native American tribes used it as a dye and a medicine. By the 18th century, American settlers were using bloodroot pastes to draw out infections, to treat respiratory complaints, to attack skin tumors. The paste was called black salve. By 1950, the Food and Drug Administration was blocking the interstate shipment of all black salve formulations. The agency has since classified bloodroot products as a fake cancer cure and issued repeated warning letters to anyone marketing them. The plant is still legal to grow. The traditional use that made it valuable to your great-grandmother is, in federal law, the part that disappeared. Number 3. Pokeweed, Phytolacca americana, a 6-foot weed with deep magenta berries. Toxic raw, edible after careful boiling. Southern Americans called the young leaves poke salad, and the dish was a spring tradition across Appalachia and the Carolinas from the colonial period through the 1960s. The Food and Drug Administration has warned against any commercial food use of pokeweed because of the toxicity in raw form. The plant grows wild on every fence line in the American South. The Sunday table tradition that processed the toxicity out of it properly has mostly died with the people who knew how. Number 2. Cannabis, the sister story to the hemp at number 6. Same plant species, different role. American doctors prescribed cannabis tinctures from the 1840s through the early 20th century for pain, for sleep, for menstrual cramps, for spasms. The Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 and the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 did to cannabis what they did to hemp. By the present day, 38 states have legalized cannabis in some form. The federal government still has not. And number 1 on this list, sassafras. The smell of root beer, the smell of summer porches, the smell of a grandmother stirring something dark on a wood stove. Sassafras albidum, the Native American tree that grew from southern Maine to northern Florida, whose roots were dug out, washed, scraped, and boiled to make the original American root beer. Charles Hires built a soft drink empire on it in 1876. Drugstore soda fountains sold a glass for a nickel. Grandmothers brewed it for coughs, for blood tonics, for the taste of it. The smell of a kitchen with sassafras tea boiling on the stove is something most Americans alive today have never experienced. In 1960, the Food and Drug Administration banned saffrole, the compound that gave sassafras root its flavor, from any use in food. Animal studies had shown saffrole caused liver tumors in rats. The ban was 1 paragraph long. It killed the American root beer industry overnight. What you drink today, labeled root beer, contains no sassafras. The flavor is synthetic. The tree still grows in 25 American states. Almost nobody touches it. 1 paragraph in 1960 ended a 100-year tradition. That brings us back to the beginning. At the start of this list, the man in the Kentucky farmhouse was walking through a field of something his family had grown for nearly 100 years. 12 acres of hemp. A crop the federal government would, 2 years later, declare a crime. He stands in for every grandparent on this list. The woman in 1930 boiling sassafras root on a wood stove. The grandfather brewing wormwood bitters. The aunt picking pokeweed for Sunday dinner. The grandmother whose bread seed poppies came back in the same flower bed every spring without her ever planting them. None of them thought they were doing anything wrong. None of them were. The rules caught up later. That is the part that stays with me. Not the politicians, not the agencies. The people who lost the knowledge slowly enough that nobody noticed. When you stand in the middle of a modern grocery store, you are standing in a building that has been cleaned of every plant on this list. Some were cleaned by regulation. Some were cleaned by the industries the regulations protected. A few were cleaned by genuine safety findings. Most were cleaned because somebody needed something to enforce, and the plants in your grandmother's yard were easier to enforce against than the men making real money off the consequences. If your grandmother grew any of the 20 plants on this list, leave the name in the comments. I read them. The recipes for what to do with these plants are not all gone yet. Not while there is still somebody alive who remembers.